Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 119 of the Not Joanna Eggs podcast. This week, Robin and myself are reviewing the 1981 Disney animated film, The Fox and the Hound, directed by way too many people, about 3 people. But this movie is weird in how messed up its production history is, but still memorable in a few ways. So we hope you guys dig this review, and thank you so much for listening. Take care. Bye. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Not Joanna Eggs podcast. I'm Tracy.
And I'm Robin.
And today we got kind of a weird one, but more that one that I know we've both watched quite a bit before.
Oh, yeah.
And there wasn't any real reason that we hadn't done this, but I think it was just recently I had rewatched this movie and I was like, you know what? This movie's very sad and also has an incredibly troubled backstory.
Yeah.
So I think we should talk about it.
We also don't normally do Disney movies, which is why I think we waited a while on this. Because, let's be honest, Disney don't need it.
No, yeah, I mean, because most Disney features are relatively well known. Like even stuff like The Rescuers Down Under, like it tends to get forgotten about. It was smack dab in between The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, which is like,
right.
It's kind of understandable why people didn't really know that much about it. This particular movie is very symbolic of where the studio was at that time.
Oh, yeah.
So it's The Fox and the Hound, which originally came out in 1981. And I think it had a joint directorship, which is very apparent.
I thought it was... So maybe it was technically, but there was definitely
it started off with it. Yeah. So
yeah, because that's part of the very sort of sordid development history of this.
Yeah. So technically this film had 3 directors, which is always a great sign.
God.
So let's see. There was Ted Berman, Richard Rich, who later ended up directing The Swan Princess, oddly enough. And Art Stevens, and this is the debut for Ted Berman and Richard Rich. And it was produced by Ron Miller, Wolfgang Reitherman, and Art Stevens. So Wolfgang Reitherman was this guy that I guess he had been around for like a long time. I think he animated Monstro back in Pinocchio, so like the early 40s. So this movie is all about how there were a new group of animators that were trying to become more prominent within the studio because the past couple movies, especially after Walt had died, had really not done that well. So basically since the late 60s, they're like, we don't know what to do.
Yeah, well, wasn't that part of the Black Cauldron debacle as well, that this was post Walt and...
This movie came before the Black Cauldron.
Did it really?
Yes. So this movie came out in 1981. It was supposed to come out Christmas of 1980, but because of some stuff going on with the animators, it was pushed back 6 months, which is always a great sign.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, yeah, 1985. Huh.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? There were so many, a lot of, A-list top animators, directors, filmmakers now that are still working, like Tim Burton, Brad Bird, John Lasseter, and Glenn Keane. Yeah, Glenn Keane, who's best known for designing and doing the majority of the animation for Ariel. He did most of the animation for the fight scene with the bear, Copper, and Todd at the end of the movie.
Sure. The other thing about this movie that's kind of wild that I never realized is that it has, a lot of A-list talent, or what would become, A-list talent.
Yeah.
In terms of the voice cast, because you've got former biggest star in the world, Mickey Rooney.
Yeah, friend of the show, Mickey Rooney, as Todd, adult Todd.
Yeah, adult Todd. Kurt Russell as adult Copper, which is wild.
This is right between Escape from New York and The Thing, which, what? But
yeah.
I guess he recorded his dialogue in 1979, though, but it is
kind
very...
of snuck in there, though, which is kind of funny.
It's just super weird to see him here.
Yeah, and Pearl Bailey.
And also Jack Albertson, who was Grandpa Joe in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, is in this.
And lest we forget, the one and only Corey Feldman as young Copper.
Baby Corey Feldman, and also Paul Winchell, who does the voice of Tigger, is Boomer, the woodpecker in this movie as well.
Boomer. It's so... I forgot that bird... I was texting Tracy about this. I forgot that one of the birds, the woodpecker in this movie, is named Boomer, and so... Early in the movie, there's several bits where they're like, okay, Boomer, let him have it, or something.
Not trying to be facetious, but it's just, they say it 5 different times.
Yeah, it's hard to digest now, seriously because
Yeah,
of
so
that.
yeah, it's weird. So let's go ahead and just discuss the general plot, and then we'll go into just some stuff that worked and didn't work, like also the history, because this is based on a book as well.
Yeah. Also, we'll talk a little bit about the book.
Okay, so the basic premise of this is that we see a baby fox that is abandoned by its mother because she is shot by a hunter, and this owl named Big Mama intervenes and sees if there's a way that she can get the local widow, the local hag in town, to take. She's not a hag. She's actually very nice.
Yeah, she's a widow, though.
Yeah, she is a widow, and they like to let you know that her husband is dead most of the time. Big Mama and some other birds named Dinky and Boomer intervene by stealing her laundry to help her discover that the fox is underneath it. So she adopts him, names him Todd, and they start growing up. Like, you see him start to age a little bit. Meanwhile, her close neighbor, Amos Slade, is a hunter who happens to have a hunting dog, and then he buys a new puppy that he can raise so that he can turn into another hunting dog. And they end up meeting each other. Todd was just playing outside, and then Copper smells him and then tries to figure out where he is.
Yep, exactly. That results in Todd and Copper kind of being friends, and obviously there's a lot of animosity there because he's a hound dog, he's a fox, and Amos Slade is a hunter. The movie less than subtly implies there's probably Amos who killed Todd's mother as well.
Yeah.
And so at one point when they're playing, Todd ends up waking up Chief, which really kind of sets things in motion as far as like Amos being more of an antagonist for Todd.
Yeah, and Chief is the older of the hunting dogs who's basically there to mentor Copper, essentially, even though he does it very begrudgingly because he doesn't want to be upstaged.
Yeah, exactly. And so then in late autumn, they go off on a hunting trip, and Todd just kind of chills out in the widow's house during the season.
Yeah, just waiting for him to come back because he misses his buddy.
And so when they come back from spring, obviously, you know, they're both more or less like, realistically, they're like teenagers, but they're more or less fully grown.
Yeah, like it's obviously been like 6 months or 3 months, however long it was between the two of them. So they both grown substantially.
Yeah. Todd tries to reconnect with Copper, and in doing so, wakes up Chief and gets him hurt, breaks his leg. And this is actually one of the big sort of points of contention of the development of this film. I want to back up a little bit. So, in the book that this is based on, Copper is actually Chief and Chief is Copper.
Yeah, they changed the names around. Like, I mean, I guess it makes more sense because you'd think that Chief would be an older dog sounding name.
Yeah. Well, and I think they just, you know, they kind of were really kind of tinkering with the relationship dynamics and how everything sort of works in this movie. Because this movie is definitely doing something sort of fundamentally different, I think, than the book, at least based on my understanding of the book. So,
Yeah.
Copper is the older dog, Chief is the younger dog, and in the book, Chief dies because of Todd, which is why later in the book and in the movie, there's this greater animosity between them. But one of the directors was like, well, we've never killed a Disney. I read the direct quote is like, geez, we've never killed a main character in a Disney movie, and we're not going to start now. And I can't help but read it in a Don-Nazi voice. Oh, geez, I don't know. We never killed a main character before. We shouldn't start now. Oh.
But the animation team were all like, there's no stakes for it if he doesn't die. You know, like Copper has to have a reason to want to kill Todd.
Like, the death is much more powerful, but the studio ultimately backed not killing the character, which of course they would.
Yeah, but I think that just kind of goes to show that it's more that they're trying to make sure that the Disney brand is more consistent.
Oh, absolutely.
I understand it fundamentally. Like, if this is going towards a much older audience, then I'd say absolutely that you would need it there. Like, this movie in general has such a tone problem because they go between doing a whole lot of slapstick between the birds trying to eat this one bug, like this.
Yeah, the caterpillar.
Yeah, this caterpillar named Squeaks, where like they keep cutting to a whole lot of like side gag things, which really are not that interesting.
I love that through line.
I personally didn't, just because I was like, I felt like it was just very obvious padding, at least. I could kind of tell that they're just like, look, we have to have more stuff to be there for kids. Like, more stuff that kids would be more interested in.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other sort of one of the big, I think, conflicts of this movie is it ultimately has a tone problem of it certainly is trying to do something a little darker and harsher than most Disney films had done before.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like brand consistency, they had trouble sort of making that fit with the Disney brand. And so that's why you get things like Squeaks. There's actually a cut song which
Oh God! Reading this thing just made my blood boil.
Please read the section about this song.
Okay.
For me.
All right. So, there's a few songs that are within this, and they're mostly pretty innocuous.
They're fine.
Stuff. Yeah, some of them are not terribly good, but the Best of Friends is pretty great.
Yeah.
But okay.
Elimination.
So
lack of education. Which isn't really a song so much as it is a spoken word thing, but
it's more of like a beat poetry kind of thing, but whatever.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's all right. The first director, who was Wolfgang Reitherman, he felt that the second act was a little bit lax, so he wanted to put in a music number involving two cranes voiced by Phil Harris, who voiced Baloo, and Little John, which is from The Jungle Book and Robin Hood, respectively.
Oh, right. Okay. I was like,
and
Charo.
And Charo, who is I believe she was a Brazilian singer or star.
Yeah.
Like way back in the day, she was on like a bunch of variety shows and shit. She was also in Thumbelina as the frog lady, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, just like a really weird. Just a weird pull for Charo.
Yeah, number one, I don't think that fundamentally their voices would work together at all. But the title of the song that they wanted them to sing was called Scooby Dooby Doo, Let Your Body Turn to Goo, or something like that. And this is supposed to be right after Todd is dropped off in the game preserve, which is probably the biggest, the emotional high point of the film. Like, oh God, because they have
just such a weird idea.
Well, yeah, because they have this really sad song of like Widow Tweed just being like, goodbye may seem forever or something, but it's all about like memories and shit, and it's very sad.
Yeah, it's like a nice moving song.
Yeah, but like, could you imagine immediately getting in there where it's like Scooby Dooby Doo, let your body turn to goo? Like,
I can't.
No.
I can. The problem is the only reference point I have for Charo is her like walk-on gag in The Simpsons, where she says, "I shake my maracas," and she has like these ridiculous ginormous cans. Yeah,
which she does, but at the same time, it's like, most of my reference was them using her as a talking head on VH1's I Love the 70s, because because that was like her peak time, she did a lot of variety shows, which like, totally fine. But God, that would be so weird to see that in this movie, especially because the time frame of this film, I believe it's supposed to be sometime in the 1930s, I would say.
It definitely feels like certainly pre-World War II, maybe contemporaneous with World War I, but
I would argue that it would probably be, because I think Amos drives a Model T.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm agreeing with you. Like, 30s feels about right.
No, I'm just saying, like, in terms of like technology and the way that everything was stylized, it feels more in touch with kind of like Dust Bowl kind of aesthetic, stuff like that, even though this is clearly in the Appalachians.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
I think it's just really tragic about this movie is that there's parts of it that are really, really good. Like the relationship that they have between Todd and Copper, like showing the evolution of it. Yeah, that's awesome. Seeing him start to acclimate to the forest, those bits are good, like especially with him and Vixie. Those are cute. Once Copper goes on the hunting trip with Chief and Amos, you get to see, like, Todd gets to look at the fur shed that Amos has on his property of all the, like, tanned hides or, like, all the carcasses of the dead foxes and everything. But I could definitely see how they were saying that they needed to push it a little bit farther in terms of, like, being not so much, like, edgier, but, like, definitely, like, a more definitive differentiation of, like, the nature versus nurture thing, where the two of them want to both be friends, but because of the circumstances of who they're living with, it really changes their perception of each other.
Yeah, I don't know. And it's interesting to me, the way this movie is in part about that, and in part has to do with growing up, right?
Yeah.
And weirdly then is also, behind the scenes, there's this sort of unintentional transition between, like, older and younger animators.
Yeah, for sure. I think it should be noted, too, that, like, because of a lot of issues that were going on with where they wanted to take everything, Don Bluth is actually uncredited on this film because he had put in his resignation before the movie came out, which was actually part of the reason why they had to delay it, because more shots were going to their veteran animators, like so people that had been around for longer, because they had to have more people being trained.
Right, and a bunch of them. So Don Bluth resigned, and then, like, what was it, something like 13 or 14?
Yeah,
like,
13 more animators followed. I'm pretty sure Tim Burton was one of them because he wasn't credited either.
I thought Tim Burton was, like, kind of an up-and-comer at that time.
He was, but I think that after leaving this movie, he went on to make his own stop-motion film, Vincent, and then he did Frankenweenie and a couple of other things. And then from there, he ended up getting, I think, Pee-wee's Big Movie.
Pee-wee's Big Adventure, and then
Big
yeah,
Adventure.
because it's in the Nightmare Before Christmas thing,
But yeah, I mean, it's nuts because there are certain scenes when you're watching the movie, especially once they start introducing Todd, like when you see him peering out from behind one of the fence poles, it's like, that's obviously Don Bluth, you know? Like,
oh yeah,
I don't know what it is, but he's got a good way of making like characters look both like curious and scared with like kind of like they've got two little teeth protruding out or whatever. Like, it's just something about how his style is.
He's very good at like putting a lot of expression and emotion into his characters, and obviously like most of his characters are animals, but he seems to do really well at that with animals.
Yeah, because I think he also animated the widow milking her cow.
That was one of the scenes that he was like big on, was milking the cow in that scene, and then other people in his team were working on sort of other stuff sort of surrounding that.
Yeah, and then also once she shoots Amos's radiator in his car.
God.
Which was a good scene. I mean, like, that was legit because like it was at a point where I guess Amos assumed that Todd was chasing the chickens or trying to eat them in the backyard, but he was really just playing, and then Chief was just chasing after him, which ended up startling the chickens. But
he shot at her car and destroyed her milk.
Yeah, he's trying to shoot at Todd, who's hiding in the back of the car with a bunch of milk tanks, and then from there he shoots all of them, and she's like, "What the fuck is wrong with you? You could have killed me." It's just, it's insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, man. I could understand why it would seem like it was very sort of uneven to a lot of people, you know, because like when I was watching it, Kent was like, God, this movie is so slow paced. I'm like, I think a lot of it just boils down to the fact that they were making it in the late 70s.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just older movies in general. Like the further back you go, the more they sort of take their time to an extent. I mean, obviously there's ones that don't, but that was just sort of more the style.
I mean, I will give the Fox and the Hound this kind of credit. They did not do any of the recycling of animation that tended to happen with those two movies, because I don't think that, like, you know, it's just, that was just such a dark time for them where they're just like, we don't have the means to be able to do this, so we're just going to trace over these scenes and just make the characters look different. So
yeah, and that's just a resources time problem.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's talk about like what the actual topic of this book was that inspired the movie, because it's so different.
Yeah, well, so the book ultimately ends up being more sort of like more sort of about like urbanization encroaching upon rural spaces, I think.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And it like that sort of coupled with almost like a sort of monomaniacal hunting, because it becomes a thing after Chief in the book dies that Copper and the hunter, who in the book is just called Master, are just sort of relentlessly after Todd every season. And eventually they do catch him, but it's also because of sort of encroaching urbanization, there just is less and less space.
I do want to note that the way that Chief dies in both the book and the movie, Copper in the book and then Chief in the movie, is that there's a certain scene where they're running up on a mountainside and then they go across a bridge for a train. And the train ends up coming. Todd's able to evade it, but Chief is not, and then he is killed. Which is like, it's genuinely really brutal, because you see the train coming straight at him. Chief freezes like a deer in headlights, and then he's hit.
He's supposed to die in that moment, and he does in the book.
Oh no, yeah, dude, from that impact and that height, Chief should have died in the movie.
Oh no, he should. Yeah. There's no way.
Which is
right?
like, they totally copped out, but it's like, it's a movie intended for children. They couldn't do it, you know?
Yeah, similar in my mind too. The bear fighting Copper and Todd, that bear would have just crushed him. Like, a black bear is nothing to fuck with.
No, yeah, it was like the one instant of where you see Copper trying to fight back against the bear itself, and the bear just swipes at him. I'm like, Copper should have been disemboweled by that. But I mean, it's genuinely really cool to watch the fight scene happen, and I like that within the book, it's all about like this kind of Javert, Jean Valjean style of like just trying to pursue each other. I mean, honestly, it kind of is, you know.
It's been like a very long time since I've experienced any Les Mis, so.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of like the endless, relentless pursuit, where it's like, despite urbanization and the Master, like, he's got people that are like encouraging him to try to go to an assisted living facility because he's been drinking so much They're just like, look, we think that you should go into a nursing home because we're really worried about your health. He's like, no, fuck that. I haven't killed this fox yet. And he ends up actually doing some kind of public service thing about trying to like kill some foxes relating to a rabies outbreak.
Yeah, so there's an outbreak of rabies, and he tries to kill a bunch of the foxes and eventually, like, organizes a group to hunt the foxes. Still don't manage to get Todd.
Yeah, dude, this fox is unbelievable. Like, it's like
he's very foxy.
Yeah, he's extremely wily, and I guess he was based on a fox called Old Baldy. Like, I guess it was based around Thorndale, Pennsylvania, where he would constantly keep trying to have hound dogs chase him on this place called the Trenton Cutoff, which is a train bridge, where he would just like, he would have them follow him and then wait for a train to show up, then duck down, and then the dogs would die. So it just kept happening so much.
Fucking bastard.
Yeah, I know.
God.
I guess there was some kind of story that was relating to this fox, like back in 1887, I guess is roughly when like Old Baldy's story was going on.
Mm-hmm.
This hound dog named Boston had chased after him for, I think, 50 miles. Like, so a day and a half solid of just running after him. They both ended up catching up to each other eventually because they died of exhaustion and were buried together. So, which is crazy because the dog Boston was only 3 years old, but it's just from sheer exertion how the dog died. I mean, like, understandable, but Jesus. I mean, that's just crazy because like this book really does follow a whole lot about like how I guess he had a pair of foxes. Like the writer Daniel P. Mannix had 2 foxes that he kept at his house, so he had gotten them used to being around him so that he could just watch them fight or eat or have sex or what have you.
That last one concerns me.
I mean, they noted that he did it, so I'm like, I guess, you know, if it doesn't bother him, it doesn't bother them. I don't know.
I guess they're exhibitionists, which, I mean, good for him.
I mean, I'd say so, but I'd also mention the fact that this has actually been an ongoing research thing in terms of like domestication of foxes. Like, in Russia specifically, I think they had a program for 50 or 60 years to try to see how many generations of foxes it would take to get them domesticated.
They're definitely, because I remember watching a video about this. It's one of my favorite like weird tidbits. Is like, it's definitely a holdover from like, so literally the USSR was like. These researchers were researching how to domesticate foxes, and they're like, okay, sure, we can throw money at that. And then I think, like, once it transitioned to being Russia again, I feel like it was probably just forgotten about for a while, and no one just like, where's this money going to? I don't know. Let's go find out. They're domesticating foxes?
I think it was like to a certain point they weren't getting government money for it. They were just doing it because they wanted to. But, but it turns out that a lot of those foxes are now being used to create like more domesticated foxes in general.
Yeah.
Like, I think some of them have been bought by American investors or something to be able to raise their own kits.
Yeah, so it's a long process of like ultimately what they've kind of got now, and again, this is like after 40 or 50 years of doing this, they've gotten like consistently tame foxes, not domestic yet. Yeah. Which is like a notable difference.
This movie is super weird too, in that it takes place in what appears to be Appalachia, or I believe Western Pennsylvania or somewhere around there, because Disney has never done any story relating to like country life or rural lifestyles in the United States. Like it's always about like, you know, like something in New York or, you know, California, like with Bolt, or New Orleans with Tiana for Princess and the Frog.
Yeah, when it's based in, there's very rarely is it based in any sort of real world location.
For sure, especially this recent. Yeah, I would say that it's a little bit past Princess and the Frog, but I think just like more in relation to like, say if this movie had come out now, there would be a very lucrative brand sponsorship with Bass Pro Shop or Cabela's or something. I mean, you know that there would, right?
Yes.
Like they'd have to, because it's not just they have a very like honest depiction of hunting, like not like with Gaston, where it's clearly just all about like him just doing it for, you know, basically clout. But like with Amos's character, there's a certain scene where they're driving back from doing their hunting trip, and the entire back of the trailer that he has hooked up to his car is just filled
Full
with
of pelts.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I was like, Amos, you're the reason that we have so many conservation efforts now. Because, well, no, I'm just saying, like, because I've done some fishing over this past summer, and like, it's very strict about what regulations of fish that you can take with you. They have to be a certain
Right.
size, or there's certain varieties that you can't take. Like if he had like 8 sturgeon in the back of his car, like he would be a complete pariah because they're so rare and they're such ancient fish that you're not supposed to really catch them that often.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a very strict thing, I think, especially up in Alaska. But yeah, it's just like stuff like that, like because you just see like so many of them in the back. But most hunting regulations, like you have to have them at a certain age, certain weight class, stuff like that.
Right.
And
right.
yeah, I've never seen anything like that ever put into a Disney movie. Like if it wasn't for this book, I don't think they would ever think to do something based in the country.
Oh, no, absolutely not. Well, you don't, I mean, there's a lot about this that just isn't sort of replicable anymore in Disney films.
Yeah, like none of this would be very brand specific for them because like they've really just leaned into doing a lot of fairy tale stuff or like weird kind of like meta, like we can make fun of ourselves kind of stuff.
Man,
so.
I was saying this last night about I really miss like just a good earnest movie that just like I would love for Disney to stop making sort of meta fourth wall breaky jokes. Like it's fine. You can just make the movie and not address whatever criticisms people have conceived before the movie fucking comes out. Who cares?
The whole thing would just be like them just being like, oh, aren't we progressive for having like, hey, Moana doesn't have a love interest in this. And I'd just be like, there are so many other studios that have been doing that and they don't want a pat on the back. You know, it's like, it's irritating.
Well, and I don't, like it makes the whole joke of like, you're the daughter of a chief and you have an animal companion, you're a princess. Like, shut up.
Yeah, exactly.
Just let the movie be the movie.
Dude, that was the most tedious part of Wreck-It Ralph 2 was like, there's a certain scene where Vanellope comes across a section of the internet called Oh My Disney, where you just see all the properties that they had purchased. So there's like a pavilion for the Muppets, there's one for Marvel, there's one for Star Wars.
And I never watched Ralph Breaks the Internet.
You're a better person for not seeing it because
my
it really
world just feels a little bit more happy, I think.
It's a richer experience to not watch that piece of shit. But God, like, no, like that's genuinely what's so tragic. Where it's just like, okay, you have these properties. Now, what are you gonna do with them? Because
Nothing.
And that was the thing. So Kent and I, we watched the Muppet movie, and we also watched Muppet Christmas Carol over the past couple weeks.
Yeah, because they're both great.
No, yeah, and I was like, there's such obvious heart and care and humor and like a weird, fun, like actually applicable meta sense of humor where it's like it's not about them making fun of themselves. It's just about them making like weird observational stuff based on that time. Or like Steve Martin is like this very irate, impatient waiter, you know, like which is great, but. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, it feels more like they're more about getting out a certain amount of content that has to conform to certain standards or what have you that doesn't allow for a whole lot of creativity anymore or like a lot less experimentation, you know? And I like Disney whenever it's really fucking weird. Like that's why I like this movie. Like, I like that The Rescuers was the only theatrically released sequel that they had until Return to Neverland, you know? Like
yeah. So I think what really bothers, I mean, it's always been this way with Disney in particular, but
yeah.
I think the design by committee thing is just such a frustrating thing that we really need to like break out of. Like,
yeah,
a really good example actually is like Overwatch characters. If you look at like early development sketch of some of the characters, it is so much more interesting and cool by miles than the thing that came out, but because it has to churn through this machine of committees and garbage, you end up getting these really sort of like some of the character designs, as interesting as they are, some are very bland.
Sorry, what were the ones that you thought that got the biggest downgrade?
Ash.
Oh, okay.
110%.
That's a shame.
Like if you look at concept art of Ash, is such a much more interesting character than like white-haired cowboy lady.
Yeah, that's true.
Like that's like, it doesn't help that there's another popular video game that has a character named Ash who is a white-haired lady wearing black clothes, and she has a bow, so it's different than Ash. Overwatch, who has a gun, is different than Ash League of Legends who has a bow. Like, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, like I think that it's the whole committee thing really is very upsetting because that's kind of this movie in a nutshell. Where it's like the stuff that really works is the stuff that I think that the new animators were pushing for, but the old animators were more concerned about trying to save money and like having it stay within that brand so strictly that the final product just ends up being kind of underwhelming. Like I still like it. I still think that there's a lot of good stuff about it, but you can very clearly tell that there were two very different groups of people that were working on this, and it kind of feels like a messy divorce.
Yeah.
They're trying to divide up different assets about what they want to do about certain things, and it's just, I don't know. It was just kind of a bummer, you know? Like, the ending is still kind of bittersweet and nice, but they could have pushed it a lot farther than they did.
Yeah. I think there's a lot they could have done, but they ended up choosing not to for, various reasons, but ultimately the movie is probably a lot weaker for it.
I mean, I'd still recommend checking it out, especially if you have Disney Plus
Fox
or
and The Hound,
I definitely wouldn't show a very young kid this movie, though. I would say 6 or 7 would probably be more appropriate because the ending scene is pretty terrifying. At least for like really little kids.
Yeah, I think 8 is probably about.
Okay. Well, let's see. Any other closing thoughts, or what did you watch?
I actually just finished watching the first season of Euphoria last night on HBO Max, and it is extremely good. It's also weird to watch as an adult because all the characters are in like high school. So sometimes you're sitting there watching it and you're like, please don't do this thing. Like, I know you think this is like this kind of big deal, but you're in high school. Like, it's fine.
Honestly, am I the only one who wants to see more anime series about people between their 20s and mid-30s?
No, you are not.
Because I was just like, I'm not in high school. I can't relate to this.
Yeah, there's a certain level at which, like, I'm just very tired. That's, I think, one of the reasons I've slipped out of anime. There's others, but so much of it is based on, like, sort of teens and adolescents, and I'm 30-something now, and it's a lot harder to relate and enjoy at a certain point.
Yeah, dude, I was watching K-On! At one point, which is the anime series about the girls that start the light music band, whatever it is. And I would just be like, the main character, I'm like, she's such a dumbass. I was like, I liked all the other characters except her. And I'd just be like, why is no one just saying like, hey, stop being an idiot. You can't afford to get that guitar. Do not emotionally blackmail your friend into buying it for you. That's fucked up. No, because like that happens within like the first 3 episodes. I'm like, I hate this character. Like, I know that she's supposed to be kind of a space cadet, but I'm like, I don't want her to succeed. And I certainly don't want them to reward her for being an idiot, you know?
Yeah, well, there's a difference between a character being kind of spacey and like, there's a certain threshold at which like a character has to sort of not be a piece of shit, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, like, she didn't have more overarching positives about, like, being especially kind or, you know, like, sensible. It's like everyone just has to hold her hand through the entire thing. She wants more stuff than she can afford. Like, it's really irritating. All she wants to do is just eat cake. Like, this is not stuff I want to see.
Yeah,
or, like,
and I wonder...
I like parts of it, but all the other characters are more interesting and more passionate about stuff than she is.
I mean, yeah, and sometimes it's like that, right? Sometimes the main characters are the least interesting. Looking at you, Naruto.
Yeah, there you go. Dunking on him. Or Hercules, for that matter, in the Disney movie. Where, like, he's fine, but he's just kind of, nah. He's all right.
He's okay.
Meg's more interesting.
Oh my God! Speaking of Meg, if you're a fan of Hades, the game by Supergiant Games, the voice actress for Megara from that game sang Megara's song from the movie, and it's beautiful.
Wait, she sang it in the game?
No. So she independently on Twitter just made a video of herself singing that song.
Oh, that's cute.
In the voice of Meg from the game.
I like that.
Yeah, it's super great. So, anywho, what have you been watching lately, Tracy?
Yeah, all right. Well, mostly I've just been... So I forgot to cancel my Disney Plus membership because it happened to fall a couple of days before Christmas, and I was extremely busy. So, which is, I mean, it's $8. It's not the end of the world, but... Yeah, so I've mostly been watching some stuff on there, including this movie, obviously, and also quite a few Muppet movies, or at least 2 of them, which was the Muppet Christmas Carol and the Muppet movie, which I had never seen, but was very surprisingly funny.
It's so good.
Like I don't know what it was. It was like between the Muppets and Rankin Bass, I just didn't watch them when I was growing up, and there's nothing wrong with them at all. It just wasn't stuff that we watched that often. So.
Well, I didn't watch the Muppet movie until I think I was a teenager or something.
Yeah, I mean, like, the first time was about 2 weeks ago as I was recording this, and I was like, holy shit, that's really funny. Like, now I really want to watch the Muppets Take Manhattan and the Great Muppet Caper.
Haven't seen Muppets Take Manhattan, but Muppet Caper is wild.
Great. Okay.
Oh no, I love it. It's one of my favorites.
But yeah, other than that, I don't even know what I've been thinking. I've been meaning to watch Hilda, and I've been meaning to watch The Wolfwalkers, but I haven't seen either of them.
And I don't have Apple Plus.
Yeah, I don't want to get Apple
Yeah, I'm definitely not doing that.
I would
Fuck
rather
you, Apple.
just rent it, personally. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, just the past few days, like, I watched American Psycho twice within 4 days.
What is it with you in that movie, man?
I don't know. So Kent is going to make a concept album about it, basically, or like using that title. But it's just something about it's so quotable because he's such a dork, but he's he's like just such a piece of shit. Yes. I don't know. But I probably won't include American Psycho on my list this time. But if you listen, you know.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, other than that, not really too much. Just been getting into a lot of video editing lately.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. I just, I'm trying to like branch out and do more like visual stuff, like, like just like other editing, because I like sound editing quite a bit, but I'd rather get into video too, just to kind of branch out a bit.
Should be the total package.
All right. Well, I guess that's pretty much it. Let's go ahead and do our handles. Where can they find you, Robin?
As always, you can find me on Twitter at @lobster_writer. I can tweet again. I was locked out of tweeting for a week because
for a very like dumb, innocuous tweet. It was
it was unbelievably stupid.
I mean, like the instant I saw that, I was like, really? Like, there have been people that have like tweeted like neo-Nazi bullshit.
Yeah, right. Like I've submitted several complaints. Like, you locked me out for this, but like,
really,
heaven forbid we shut down actual like neo-Nazis. Come. Anywho, I'm back on Twitter, @lobster_writer, on Instagram @lobsterwriter, where I post most of my sewing projects when they're at some point or another. Tracy, where do they find you?
Thank you, Robin. They can find me on Twitter and Instagram via @TCTroush. You can find my website via tracytroush.com. If it's easier for you to find our episodes on YouTube, they are uploaded there concurrently whenever they go up on Libsyn. Just look for Not Joanna Eggs podcast and just look for our head logo. They should all be up there. And I'm doing some like visual shit, but like right now I'm just waiting to round out the end of the year so then I can just be like, hey, it's January, I'll do something new. Look, man, I'm just trying to get through the next 3-4 weeks.
All right, thank you so much for listening to our podcast.
More positivity from Big T right here.
Yeah. This is what we're at now.
I'm kind of still surprised I'm awake right now. I'm just not back in my bed in a little cocoon. Just being like, I wish Kent was here so we could hug.
Oh.
But it's all right. All right, but yeah, thanks so much for listening, guys. We'll talk at you next time. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks again so much for listening. Our intro music is Don't Hold My Breath by Ben Briggs. The outro is Wet Dreams by Phonetic Hero. Both were found on ocremix.org. If you like the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us, or tell a friend to check us out. We're on iTunes, Stitcher, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Find the show website via notjoannaeggs.tumblr.com. Follow us on Twitter via @lobster_writer and @TCTroush. Not Joanna Eggs, because animation is for everybody.
Hello. Sorry, my cat is very loud.
She's such a sassy pants.
She has so much to say, and everyone must hear it.
Push her head away. We're recording.
She's
Not now, baby. Daddy's working.